The word assassin has been abused by history, cinema, literature, and video games. It has been painted as something elegant, mystical, almost noble. Cloaks, shadows, silent blades, moral codes. This image is convenient and mostly false. In reality, the life of an assassin has almost never been glamorous. It has been brutal, short, paranoid, psychologically corrosive, and socially isolating. Assassins were not heroes. They were tools, sometimes fanatics, sometimes professionals, often disposable. This text is not about fantasy. It is about how assassins actually lived, trained, thought, survived, and died. What an assassin really is. Historically, an assassin is not simply a killer. A killer murders. An assassin kills for a purpose larger than himself, political, religious, ideological, or strategic. Key characteristics of a true assassin. Targets are specific individuals, not random victims. The act is premeditated and symbolic. The killing is meant to send a message. Escape is secondary. Impact is primary. This already destroys the Hollywood idea. Most real assassins did not expect to survive. The first assassins, the Hashashin. The term assassin comes from the medieval Middle East, from the Hashashin, an Ismaili sect active between the 11th and 13th centuries. Contrary to popular myth, they were not drugged fanatics. There is no solid evidence they used hashish before missions. That story came mostly from enemies and later European travelers. What they were: highly disciplined, fanatically loyal, politically surgical. Their assassinations were public, theatrical, and deliberate. Targets were killed in mosques, courts, or public spaces, often with a dagger, often in front of witnesses. Why? Because terror spreads faster than secrecy. Training, not glamour, just conditioning. Assassin training was never about cool moves. It was about obedience, emotional suppression, precision under stress, acceptance of death. Common elements across cultures: repetitive physical conditioning, memory training, faces, routes, routines. Weapons mastery limited to one or two tools. Psychological breaking and rebuilding. Assassins were not creative artists. Creativity causes hesitation. They were predictable machines by design. This is where romantic myths die completely. Most assassins shared psychological traits: emotional flattening, extreme compartmentalization, reduced empathy, not zero, but controlled, chronic paranoia, identity erosion. They didn't enjoy killing. They learned to function during it. Long-term effects included insomnia, dissociation, hypervigilance, and loss of personal identity. Many assassins described themselves as already dead long before their final mission. Daily life, boring, tense, isolated. Forget rooftop chases. Most of an assassin's life consisted of waiting, observing, memorizing routines, and avoiding attention. They blended in: merchants, servants, monks, soldiers, bureaucrats. The danger wasn't the kill, it was the months before it, where one mistake meant torture and public execution. Weapons. Tools, not extensions of ego. Assassins historically preferred daggers, short swords, poison, rare but real. Later, pistols. Why daggers? Silent, reliable, intimate, symbolic. Poison was unreliable. Dosage issues, delayed effects, risk of discovery. Firearms only became common when escape routes improved. Political assassins, disposable assets. Governments loved assassins publicly and denied them privately. If caught, they were disowned, labeled lunatics or traitors, executed brutally. Assassins were never protected long-term. They were useful until inconvenient. History is full of names remembered and thousands erased. Failure was common. Reasons: changed routines, unexpected guards, nervous breakdowns, moral hesitation, and pure bad luck. Failure meant immediate execution, torture, public humiliation, and retribution against family. Assassins lived knowing failure was worse than death. Women assassins, rare but deadly. Women were used less often, which made them more effective. Advantages: lower suspicion, social access, domestic proximity. Disadvantages: harsher punishment if caught, exploitation by handlers, total erasure from records. Their lives were shorter and crueler. Modern assassins, same game but better tools. Technology changed methods, not reality. Modern assassins still face disposable status, psychological collapse, lack of exit plans, and political betrayal. Drones and poisons replaced daggers, but the human cost remains identical. The lie of the code. The assassin's code is mostly fiction. Real rules were simple: complete the mission, do not improvise, accept consequences. Honor was irrelevant, results mattered. Death expected, not feared. Most assassins did not expect retirement, did not plan old age, did not imagine redemption. Death was not dramatic, it was inevitable. Many were killed anonymously. Some were betrayed. Few were remembered accurately. The life no one should want. The assassin is not a hero, not a rebel, not a philosopher. They are a function of power, fear, and control. Their lives were short, lonely, violent, psychologically destructive. The myth survives because the truth is uncomfortable. And that, ironically, is the most assassin-like thing of all, to disappear behind a story someone else invented. Recruitment. No one is chosen by fate. Assassins were rarely volunteers driven by pure ideology. They were recruited, pressured, or cornered. The most common recruitment paths in history. 1. Ideological grooming. Young people raised inside rigid belief systems where obedience equaled virtue. By the time they understood the cost, refusal was impossible. 2. Debt and dependency. Food, shelter, protection, or money were provided first. The mission came later. By then, leaving meant starvation, prison, or death. 3. Coercion. Families threatened, crimes fabricated, secrets exposed. This method was especially common in modern intelligence services. 4. Psychological selection. Individuals already detached, traumatized, or socially isolated were easier to mold, not stronger, emptier. There was no mysticism, no destiny, just exploitation of human vulnerability. Identity erasure. An assassin could not afford a stable identity. Names were temporary. Roles were replaceable. Faces were masks. Over time, this caused dissociation. I am not the one doing this. Fragmented memory. Loss of personal moral compass. Emotional numbness outside of missions. Many former assassins described a disturbing effect. They felt more real during a kill than during normal life, because violence was the only moment their existence had clarity. Moral justifications, lies that keep you functional. No assassin operates without internal justification, but those justifications are rarely noble. Common rationalizations. I am already damned. These beliefs are not philosophies. They are psychological anesthesia. When the justifications collapse, usually years later, the damage surfaces violently. After the kill. The silence. The moment after an assassination is not triumphant. It is quiet, unnaturally quiet. Physiological effects reported across cultures: tunnel hearing, loss of fine motor control, sudden exhaustion, nausea, emotional blankness. There is no celebration, no relief, only the awareness that nothing can be undone now. This moment haunts survivors more than the act itself. Escape. A secondary objective. Popular culture obsessively focuses on escape. Historically, escape was uncertain, often impossible, sometimes irrelevant. Many assassinations were designed with delayed capture, intentional martyrdom, or public death to amplify fear. Survival was a luxury, not an expectation. betrayal, the final pattern. If an assassin lived long enough, betrayal was inevitable. Reasons: political shifts, new leadership, risk management, scapegoating. Former handlers became threats. Former allies became liabilities. There are countless historical cases where assassins were executed after successful missions, poisoned accidentally, arrested using leaked information, or publicly denounced as extremists or criminals. Loyalty flowed one way. Failed reintegration into society. Assassins who survived and attempted normal life faced severe obstacles. They struggled with authority figures, intimate relationships, routine boredom, and moral ambiguity. Many could not tolerate ordinary conflict. Some became hyper-aggressive. Others became emotionally unreachable. The world felt unreal, too slow, too loud, too meaningless. A disturbing number returned to violence, not for ideology, but because it was the only place they felt competent.
Assassins and religion. Misused faith. Religion has been repeatedly used to legitimize assassination, but historical analysis shows religious texts were selectively interpreted. Political goals always preceded theology. Faith served as a psychological stabilizer, not a motive. True belief was irrelevant. Utility was everything. Myth-making. How history cleans the blood. Societies sanitize assassins after the fact. They become freedom fighters, revolutionaries, patriots. Details are softened. Victims are abstracted. Consequences are ignored. This myth-making serves a purpose. It allows societies to benefit from violence without admitting responsibility. Why the assassin archetype persists. The assassin myth survives because it offers control in a chaotic world, simplicity in moral complexity, and the illusion of precision violence. It tells us violence can be clean, targeted, meaningful. History proves the opposite. The ultimate psychological cost. The ultimate price assassins paid was not death. It was permanent distrust, emotional isolation, loss of innocence without replacement, and the inability to belong anywhere. Even survivors remained outsiders. They were never civilians again, never fully human in their own eyes. The life that consumes itself. The life of an assassin is not a path, it is a narrowing corridor. Every mission removes options. Every success increases expendability. Every justification corrodes the self. Assassins do not become legends. They become footnotes, symbols, or warnings. The myth survives. The people do not. The deeper you look into the life of an assassin, the less structure it has. No clean arcs, no stages of growth, no redemption curve. What exists instead is erosion, slow, invisible, irreversible. An assassin does not become something new. They lose pieces. First, they lose predictability in their own emotions. Fear doesn't disappear. It mutates.
It becomes background noise, like a constant low-frequency hum in the body. Joy doesn't vanish either. It becomes suspicious. Any moment of calm feels like a setup. What breaks first is not morality, but continuity. Life stops feeling like a story and starts feeling like disconnected scenes. Before, during, after. Nothing links them emotionally. Memory fragments. Events are recalled clinically, without weight, while insignificant details, the sound of shoes on stone, the smell of metal, a flicker of light, lodge permanently in the mind. This is not strength, this is damage. There is a popular belief that assassins are cold because they lack feeling. In reality, most are cold because feeling too much would destroy functionality. Emotional suppression is not absence, it is compression. Over time, the pressure builds. When it releases, it does so destructively, through addiction, sudden violence, self-sabotage, or total withdrawal. Sleep becomes an enemy. Dreams replay not the act itself, but anticipation, waiting, the moment before movement. The body relives stress without resolution. Many assassins learn to avoid sleep altogether. Insomnia becomes a coping mechanism. Exhaustion feels safer than memory. The body changes. Appetite fluctuates. Sensations dull. Pain becomes abstract. Some develop a strange relationship with physical injury, not masochism, but reassurance. Pain proves they still exist in a tangible way. Emotional pain is harder to locate, harder to survive. Human relationships decay rapidly. Trust requires consistency, and assassins live in constant contingency. Lies stack. Cover stories blur into personality traits. Eventually, even honesty feels performative. Intimacy becomes dangerous, not because of secrets, but because closeness threatens the internal compartmentalization that keeps the mind intact. Love is not forbidden, it is structurally incompatible. Guilt, when it appears, rarely attaches to victims. That is another myth. Guilt attaches to survival, to outliving others, to missions completed while others failed, to being useful when someone else was discarded. Survivor's guilt, without a community to process it, becomes corrosive. It turns inward. Over time, many assassins develop a distorted sense of causality. They begin to believe their presence alone changes outcomes, that they are catalysts for disaster. This belief is not delusional. It is reinforced repeatedly by experience. Wherever they go, something ends, a career, a movement, a life. Eventually, they internalize the idea that they themselves are an ending, not a person. This is where self-destructive behavior intensifies. Recklessness is not accidental. It is subconscious alignment, a desire for internal consistency. If one exists to destroy, then being destroyed feels coherent. Some take unnecessary risks. Some provoke authority. Some stop maintaining cover. Others attempt slow erasure through substances, isolation, or neglect. What is often mistaken for courage is actually fatalism. Fear of death fades not because death is conquered, but because life loses texture. When nothing feels real except moments of extreme consequence, ordinary existence becomes intolerable. Violence sharpens reality. Everything else feels flat. Handlers and institutions are aware of this decay. They rely on it. A psychologically intact assassin is dangerous to the system. They might leave. A damaged one is predictable. Dependence replaces loyalty. Once the individual can no longer imagine a life outside the role, control is complete.
There is no exit strategy that truly works. Even when an assassin escapes the structure, the internal architecture remains. Hypervigilance does not turn off. The world continues to feel hostile, staged, artificial. Crowds feel threatening. Silence feels suspicious. Peace feels temporary. Some attempt confession. It fails. Language cannot translate what was compartmentalized for survival. Others attempt justification through ideology or philosophy. That fails too. Ideas collapse under the weight of lived experience. What remains is a quiet, persistent sense of being misaligned with the world. The darkest realization arrives late, if it arrives at all. The assassin was never the weapon. They were the ammunition. Single use by design. Fired, expended, forgotten. The system does not remember precision. It remembers results. And yet, despite all this, the myth survives, because the truth is unbearable, because it is easier to imagine assassins as controlled, elegant, purposeful beings than to admit they are evidence of how efficiently power consumes humans when given permission. The real horror of an assassin's life is not the bloodshed. It is the slow removal of the future. Not death, but the certainty that nothing meaningful can grow afterward. No continuity, no legacy, no peace that doesn't feel borrowed. In the end, the assassin is not haunted by who they killed. They are haunted by who they can no longer be. There is a point where even memory gives up trying to organize itself. The past stops lining up chronologically and starts behaving like pressure pockets. Certain moments surface without warning, detached from time. Not the kill, almost never the kill, but the seconds around it. A hand hesitating where it shouldn't have. Eye contact held too long. A sound that didn't belong. These fragments return uninvited, sharp and specific, while entire years dissolve into fog. An assassin learns early that remorse is inefficient, but repression has a cost. What is pushed down does not disappear. It ferments. Over years, this creates an internal landscape that feels hostile and unfamiliar. Thoughts arrive fully formed, intrusive, violent, or nihilistic, and leave just as abruptly. The mind becomes a place to endure rather than inhabit. Time perception distorts.
The future collapses into short intervals, the next task, the next movement, the next contingency. Long-term thinking feels fraudulent. Planning a life beyond survival creates cognitive dissonance. Retirement fantasies, when they appear, feel obscene, like theft from a world the assassin has already violated.
Many begin to experience emotional echoes without sources, anger without an object, sadness without narrative, anxiety without threat. The body remembers what the conscious mind refuses to process. This is why so many assassins report physical symptoms that medicine struggles to explain: tremors, chronic pain, sudden fatigue, sensory overload. Trauma doesn't need permission to speak. There is also a quieter degradation, the loss of meaning in language. Words like justice, cause, enemy, necessary become hollow through repetition. They were used too often, too conveniently. Eventually, even silence stops being peaceful. Silence becomes accusatory. It leaves room for interpretation, and interpretation is dangerous. Some attempt to counter this by clinging to routine, obsessive habits, excessive order, ritualized behaviors that simulate control. Others do the opposite: chaos, constant movement, noise, anything to prevent introspection. Neither works for long. Control is an illusion once you have lived as an instrument. A particularly corrosive effect is the inability to witness innocence without discomfort. Children, unguarded laughter, spontaneous kindness, these don't inspire hope. They provoke alienation, a sense of exclusion, a reminder of a version of reality the assassin no longer qualifies for. Innocence becomes something observed through glass, not shared. At a certain stage, self-perception fractures. The assassin stops seeing themselves as morally bad or good. They become ontologically wrong, out of place, like a contaminant that spreads simply by remaining. This belief is rarely spoken, but it shapes behavior profoundly. It justifies isolation. It rationalizes disappearance. It makes self-erasure feel responsible. This is why many assassins do not seek forgiveness. Forgiveness implies reintegration. They do not believe reintegration is possible or deserved. What they seek instead is quiet, reduction, a lowering of internal volume. Sometimes they mistake death for silence. Sometimes they mistake numbness for peace. When death comes, naturally or violently, it is rarely dramatic. There are no final monologues, no clarity. Often there is confusion, irritation, or resignation. The end feels administratively similar to everything else that came before it, something decided elsewhere, executed efficiently, and justified afterward. What remains is not legacy, but residue, trauma transferred sideways into families, communities, history books that omit context. The assassin vanishes, but the damage does not. It diffuses. It reappears in other hands,
other justifications, other disposable lives. The darkest truth is this: the assassin is not an anomaly in human history. They are a symptom, a recurring solution chosen when systems want change without accountability, precision without responsibility, violence without ownership. And as long as that desire exists, there will always be people shaped into something that cannot survive the role they are given, not because they are weak, but because no human structure is meant to be lived inside that long.
In the end, there is no revelation, no moral balance sheet, no moment where everything finally makes sense. That expectation itself is part of the myth, the idea that enough suffering produces meaning. It doesn't. What happens instead is narrowing. The world grows smaller, not physically, but existentially. Fewer places feel accessible. Fewer conversations feel real. The assassin's inner life becomes a closed system, recycling the same questions without answers. Why me? Why still alive? Why this didn't end sooner? These are not philosophical inquiries, they are symptoms. At some point, the assassin understands something with brutal clarity. Nothing was ever personal. Not the targets, not the cause, not even the selection. They were not special, they were suitable. That realization lands late, and it lands hard, because if nothing was personal, then none of it validated the sacrifice. The body carries on out of habit. Muscles remember patterns long after purpose is gone. Reflexes fire in empty rooms. The nervous system stays armed even when there is nothing left to defend against. Standing down is not a command the body recognizes.
There is also anger, but not the explosive kind people expect. It is cold, static, directionless. Anger at being shaped into something irreversible. Anger at systems that needed monsters but refused to name themselves as such. Anger at myths that turned damage into aesthetic. Sometimes the assassin tries to explain, to write, to speak, to confess. It fails, not because people wouldn't listen, but because they wouldn't understand the cost without wanting the benefit. They want the story without inheriting the weight. So the words stay trapped. Language collapses under what it's asked to carry. Eventually, even resistance fades, not into peace, into acceptance of limitation. The understanding that some lives are not meant to resolve, that some damage is not educational, that some roles exist only to be consumed by the function they serve.
This is the true ending of an assassin's life. Not death, but irrelevance. The moment when even the system no longer needs what was created. When the weapon dulls. When silence replaces orders. When existence becomes an afterthought. And then, quietly, without ceremony, the assassin disappears into obscurity, into anonymity, into history's blind spots. The myth remains, the stories remain, the aesthetic survives, but the human being, the one who paid for all of it, does not. Not because they were erased,
but because they were used until there was nothing left to erase.